But thanks for bringing it up, Josh.
Yep.
I'm so sad now.
Speaking of things that are sad, I learned a piece of history today. Never been told this or read it in my entire life, and it is crazy.
Time for a spooky history lesson.
It's regarding the Bushes.
Okay.
So George Bush,
Yeah.
George H.W. Bush, and then it's mainly about the father, or George Bush's father, George H.W. Bush's father.
Yeah.
Who was
Prescott,
the president?
Who was not.
Who was the president?
George H.W. Bush and George Bush.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the guy you're talking about is in the middle.
No.
He's grandfather. Grandfather of W.
Was president.
No.
No. There's two Bushes.
Listen.
The dad, the son, and then the grandpa was not.
Was not. His name was Prescott Bush.
Yeah, I got that. What's up?
The thing I learned today was of how Prescott Bush and multiple businessmen elites within the United States, J.P. Morgan, the Durant family, which is General Motors, DuPont family, which is the industrial family, they made gunpowder, the Remington family, potentially Henry Ford, I had a hard time finding whether or not, were forming an active coup to take over the U.S. government and convert it into a fascist state that replicated Hitler or the Nazi Party.
No way.
Yes.
After World War II?
No.
Before.
Before. No way.
Yeah. Or before and during.
Yeah.
So, well, I guess before we got into the war. But
I can imagine that's a time where, I mean, because if the world is actually at war, that's probably a good time to attack or to build something, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially powerful families like them.
So basically, FDR was the president, and what he did was he implemented this act to where this was like right after the Great Depression or during it. He was basically going to tax the rich and tax these big corporations higher to subsidize for people that didn't have jobs. All these businessmen were like, hate that, don't want to do that. And so they formed this party called the American Liberty League. And basically, it got so far down the rabbit hole, or of them planning it, that they had recruited 500,000 ex-soldiers that fought in World War I. And they had got this guy, his name was General Farts. What was his name?
General Farts.
General Smedley Butler.
No,
Okay.
That's not real.
First of all, you just made a joke about him being Farts, and then that's his real name? That's great.
Smedley Butler. And he was a decorated war general. And so they're like, hey, come, this is what we're doing. We're forming this coup to where we are going to literally march these 500,000 soldiers to overtake the White House and implement martial law. And when we implement martial law, anyone that doesn't have a job, anyone that's unemployed, because this is during the Great Depression, they will go to these imprisonment camps and basically have to do slave labor. And anyone that opposed this party or this movement will be killed.
Whoa.
And
can I ask a question? Where did they get these 500,000 people?
They recruited these 500,000 soldiers because after World War I, they came back and they were promised a bonus by the U.S. government. And apparently they never got this bonus. So all these guys were like, well, we hate our government.
But the government always keeps its word.
Yeah, I know. But this one time they didn't. Yeah.
Disappointed.
But General Butler, Smelly Butler,
Smedley.
he was basically, without anyone telling him to do this, when he was asked to be a part of this movement of being the general of this army, he agreed, but his whole intention was to find out who was behind this thing. And as soon as he found out about all these elites, J.P. Morgan, Henry Ford, Prescott Bush, he went to have a congressional hearing, a closed congressional hearing, and spilled the beans. This is what they're planning on doing.
Oh, and so he was a rat. So he infiltrated everything.
Yeah, or a spy, I guess you could say.
Yeah. Rat.
But but this is crazy. So he did that, and instead of these, because what they were doing was treason.
Yeah.
And what happened was when Congress released the notes of that meeting, they purposely left out all of like JP Morgan's name, all these dudes' names that were just like, and he's like, why aren't you putting their names in? Like, well, we don't want to release it yet until we gather more evidence. Almost every documentation regarding this hearing was destroyed. And instead of them being charged for treason, they apparently met with FDR, and FDR said, you guys can go scout free, but you have to get behind what I want to do with this new plan that I'm implementing.
Yeah.
And what I found interesting was after they agreed to that, a year later, we entered World War II.
Whoa.
So maybe there was a plan.
I was funding, like, so he's like,
wow,
you guys don't overthrow me, and we're going to go to war, and you guys are going to profit off of the war.
Yeah.
Because that's what happened.
I'll make you some promises.
You think of like Henry Ford,
Yeah.
General Motors, making all the military equipment. You had Remington, who was an arms manufacturer. You had the DuPont family, which manufactured gunpowder. And Prescott Bush, this is where it gets crazy. Prescott Bush was actively involved in money laundering Nazi money within the U.S.
What?
He was the director, what was it? Director and vice president of Union Bank, which was laundering Nazi money in the millions.
So, okay, break that down for me. So money from Nazis is being funneled into the government, like our U.S. government.
Not our government, but in this private bank, which is the Union Bank.
Got it.
And he was also the executive manager for a company called the Hamburg American Line, which was a cruise ship, basically.
You had me at Hamburg.
Hamburg. And what they would do is they would offer journalists a free ride and pay them to go to Germany to write pieces on Hitler that would help boost his image. And they also were caught bringing back Nazi spies into the U.S. on this Hamburg American Line. But this bank didn't get dissolved until the 50s, I believe. At first, it was seized by the U.S. government in 1942 because it was the violation of the Trading with the Enemy Act.
Yeah.
But none of these guys were tried. And in fact, the U.S. government ended up liquidating the bank. And so all these people like Prescott Bush, they were basically bought out, even though that they were directly laundering money from the Nazis. And they gave him $1.5 million, which today is $18 million.
Zing.
And so it was just the beginning of this Bush empire.
Yeah.
And the Bushes were sued, I think in the early 2000s. The U.S. government and the Bushes were sued by 2 Holocaust survivors because it found out that Prescott Bush was involved with a engineer or a steel company and having Holocaust people. Sorry, I'm getting all blah, blah, blah. They had prisoners within Auschwitz manufacturing these steel industries. So they were profiting from
using them as workers.
They were profiting from slave labor in these concentration camps, and Prescott Bush was directly involved in that. And they sued the government and the Bushes for like $4 billion. I
Nice.
think.
Dude, that's wild.
40 billion.
That's craziness.
This says George Bush's grandfather, the late U.S. Senator Prescott Bush, was a director and shareholder of companies that profited from their involvement with the financial backers of Nazi Germany. There are newly discovered files in the U.S. National Archives that a firm of which Prescott Bush was a director and was involved with the financial architects of Nazism.
Bro.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's a dark history. That's some dark family history.
But the whole thing is, so Prescott Bush was involved in this political fascist movement. He was buddy with like a ton of Nazis.
Yeah.
And he was never tried for treason. In fact, he profited off of World War II, created his own Bush empire. Then years later, his son, George H.W. Bush, becomes president.
Crazy.
And then 8 years later, his son, George Bush, becomes president.
Yeah.
And so there's just a lot of weird stuff. And like the Bushes had a huge hand in like the creation of the CIA and running it and stuff. And it's just like, what?
I'm wondering why these individuals are at the crux of so many crazy things. They're like always involved.
Yeah.
I was reading just the thing about from the 1800s. There was a family, and I'm looking the lineage, but their last name was Clinton. It was a really wealthy family, and so it makes me wonder, dude. It's like the Clintons. It was just I was reading about a family involved with a conspiracy or something in the 1800s, and so I wonder, like it is strange how you see these families who continue to profit for generations, and you can cop it up to like, they were smart with their money, they were successful people, but also feels like there's some manipulation. There's a lot of
it goes back to remember when we talked about how every president is related to that one king.
Yeah.
It's like a bloodline.
It really is scary.
Yeah,
dude.
it's weird.
It's super weird.
The connection, it feels manufactured. It feels like, I don't know.
But what's crazy, all the proof for this stuff was held in the Library of Congress or whatever.
Okay.
Or the Presidential Library. I forget what it's called. So one guy, an investigative journalist, heard rumors of this, and he's like, I got to get proof for this. And he went and read through just thousands of documents and found all of this stuff. All the involvement of all these elites.
So there's paperwork, everything that backs this up. Yeah. This isn't conspiracy. This is factual stuff.
Factual stuff.
Jeez, man.
Crazy.
And another weird fact too is that when George H.W. Bush ran for president, there were some of his senior campaign staff were confirmed Nazis.
Jeez.
So
and his campaign staff.
20th century was messy,
Dude.
That is crazy.
It's messy right now.
So apparently,
humanity's messy.
Prescott was also from Yale and
the Skull and Bones Club.
Skull and Bones, but the tale is that Bush's grandfather, Prescott Bush, and some of his buddies at Yale dug up the grave of Apache Chief Geronimo, removed his skull and femur, placing them in a glass case in the lobby of the tomb, the headquarters of the university's notorious Skull and Bones Society back in 1917.
I've heard that.
Both Bush presidents were from Skull and Bones, and when George W. was going against, was it Kerry or Perry?
John Kerry.
Yeah, Kerry. Kerry's also Skull and Bones, so whoever wins that election is of the same mind. They're literally frat brothers.
I've never heard that story. The Skull and Bones thing.
Oh, you haven't?
No, tell me more about this.
It's a fraternity club at Yale, right?
Yeah, it's Yale's fraternal secret society.
And it's basically like it's creepy as heck.
You have to dig up bodies to be
No. They just did that.
That's an alleged story.
But a lot of presidents have come from the Skull and Bones Club, which a lot of members too are active members in the Bohemian Grove.
Yeah.
Jeez,
They're known for like weird rituals at night and stuff like that too.
Dude, grave robbing though?
Yeah.
What are you doing?
They do like weird fraternal rituals, but it's just like, this is just what we do. Just a bunch of frat boys doing a seance, killing goats and drinking their blood. I don't know.
Boys will be boys.
Goofing off. Delta Alpha.
Hey, come on, Bohemian Grove. It's just shower talk. Locker room talk. Come on.
Hey man, pass me another Yingling.
But
go.
I was sickened.
Also, let's go kill the sheep over here.
I was sickened to see of how many businessmen they did not give a crap about the American people, but just wanted to profit off of war. In fact, Rockefeller, who was one of the nation's richest men ever, he had an oil company. And he sold $20 million worth of oil, which this is in the 30s or whatever,
bonkers amount of money
to the Nazi party.
Jeez.
And that's what funded or got them to where they could do all these air raids, take over, like do all the crazy stuff.
Literally just helping them.
Yeah. Just like, here you go. Here's $20 million worth of gas.
How is this not known?
That's what I'm saying.
How are we just going to like, listen, I mean, obviously I was a kid when he was a president, but after president, I mean, I think he looks a lot better in light. George W. Bush, people are a big fan of him. He seems like a really great guy. But this, like at that point, when you have that much history, it's like, can you just step out for a second? You don't have to be in the limelight. You don't have to be the president of the United States, unless it is made up. Yeah, it's like Succession. They literally have like they have this group of people, rich people that come together in this retreat center, and they're literally talking about like how this is really basically where we pick the next president. And it's like the behind the scenes stuff of all these rich conglomerate families. It's like that's
Is that in Succession?
Yeah. It's a part of it. Like that's because they're just a huge multimedia company in New York City. And so they meet up and literally that's how they say that's ran.
I know I didn't formulate that story super well because I just saw it today.
I followed along. That was great.
Yeah, it was great.
I was just blown away. The fact that
You were scared earlier. You're like,
was.
you looked at me like, I have something for the pod today. And actually it scares me
Yeah, forget
to talk about it.
Forget storming the Capitol. Let's storm the Bush Ranch.
well, we talk about like
Not a chance. In Texas, not a chance.
we think about like what's happening now, and it's like, did this fascist party, did they just decide not to do it so bluntly? And so now they're taking this approach of we're just going to plan it out for the long run.
Yeah, it's the same thing they do with surveillance. They get in trouble for something and then they give you a cell phone.
Yeah.
Yeah.